From the heart of South Asia to the crossroads of Central Asia, from the turbulent Middle East and North Africa to the power corridors of the West, where narratives collide, perspectives matter, and stories connect. This is Beyond Borders. I am Omar Khalid. During the hour that will follow, we'll try to go into a world without borders and boundaries and talk about stories that are extremely important and pertinent in this changing world. We'll begin with the top stories of the day, or as we call them, region lines. US President Donald Trump says he has told Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that there should be no war with Pakistan, stressing that trade should be the focus to avoid war. At a Diwali ceremony, Trump claims that he has prevented 8 wars so far through deals and trade, including one between Pakistan and India. Also, relations between the US and China are tense again. The latest flare-up took place when Beijing expanded its restrictions on the export of rare earth metals. China's actions on rare earth came after the US expanded its trade restrictions list. Meanwhile, Pakistan's vast mineral reserves are drawing international attention, with leading American publication Foreign Policy acknowledging the country's growing significance in the global mineral landscape. In the West, Russia unleashes one of its largest retaliatory assaults on Ukraine following a series of Ukrainian strikes deep inside Russian territory, including a reported Storm Shadow missile attack on a chemical plant in the Bryansk region. These attacks have caused extensive damage to residential buildings and energy infrastructure. The Russian assault came a day after US President Donald Trump postponed a planned summit with Vladimir Putin, calling it potentially a waste of time. Lastly, Azerbaijan has removed all restrictions on cargo transit to Armenia in a sign of warming ties between the former powers following nearly 4 decades of conflict. Speaking at a meeting in Astana, President Ilham Aliyev says that a shipment of Kazakh grain via Azerbaijan to Armenia has marked the first such consignment since the transit was halted in the final years of the Soviet Union. Now we'll begin with South Asia, and of course the top story concerns what Donald Trump has been saying vis-a-vis India. He has again told India to avert or avoid any kind of war with Pakistan. He's also pressurizing India as far as abiding by what he says, stopping the purchase and export of Russian oil. More in the following report.
Wars with Pakistan, but seven aircraft were shut down, 7 planes.
Once again, U.S. President Donald Trump has reaffirmed his favorable tone toward Pakistan, cautioning India against any military confrontation with its neighbor. Speaking to reporters at the Oval Office, President Trump revealed that during a Diwali phone call with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he made it clear that there should be no war with Pakistan.
No wars with Pakistan. And I think the fact that trade was involved, I was able to talk about that. And we have no war with Pakistan and India, and that was a very, very good thing.
Trump said he believes in resolving disputes through trade and negotiation, not conflict. He noted that the absence of war between Pakistan and India is a positive sign, claiming his trade diplomacy helped ease tensions between the 2 nuclear powers. Recalling past events, Trump reiterated that he has prevented 8 potential wars globally, saying the Pakistan-India standoff was among the most serious. He added that he has stopped a major war through trade, not through weapons. Earlier, Donald Trump has claimed and highlighted several times that India lost its 7 aircrafts in recent war with Pakistan, and war could have escalated.
But 7 aircraft were shut down, 7 planes. 7 planes, it was starting.
And his threat to impose trade restrictions prompted a swift de-escalation within just 24 hours. Trump's remarks once again highlight his unconventional diplomacy, using economic pressure as a path to peace and maintaining a tone of strategic warmth toward Pakistan in South Asia's volatile landscape, which is a good sign for PAC-US relations.
To discuss more on this very avenue, we've been joined by Jamshaid Baryar, who is an international affairs analyst. He's right with us in the studio. Thank you very much to have joined us, and welcome to this new format of the show.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
And of course, we are meeting after a long hiatus. Nevertheless, let's begin without further ado. President Trump speaks of no wars with Pakistan addressing India. Is he or isn't he directly or indirectly acknowledging Islamabad's responsible and restrained posture during the conflict that happened in May, in contrast to India's adventurism under the so-called Operation Sindoor?
Well, in all honesty, I think that Trump is redefining the way diplomacy has been. And one of the things that differs Donald Trump from his past, I think, predecessors, the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party had an extra tilt towards the Modi regime. And unfortunately so, maybe they realized it the hard way that India wasn't giving anything to the world except war. Now, if you talk about specifically the way in which Trump has been reiterating the Pakistan-India diplomacy and relationship, I think for once he's trying to understand that Pakistan is a very important regional player when it comes to the political dialogue of not simply the Middle East but the South Asian dynamics as well. Secondly, simultaneous to this, I think Trump is trying to reassert Pakistan's economic strategic position to the rest of the world as well. When Trump talks about trade, definitely so, I think his long-standing corporate commitment to redefining the world in neoliberal fashion comes into action as well. But simultaneously, I think he's talking about a more sustainable world, a more equitable world, and maybe he's smart enough to realize that when it comes to South Asia, it hosts one of the largest figures of poverty in the world. It hosts one of the largest figures of disparity in the world. And rather than warmongering or, trying to get your skies lighted up once again like we lighted up before Diwali for the Indians 7-0, it's something that Donald Trump keeps on, he makes them reminded of the fact that we downed 7 jets.
It seems that as if it's a constant reminder, a deliberate reminder to tell India, I know exactly what happened.
It's an absolute deliberation that is based on Int'l. It's an absolute deliberation that desires to make Modi play the diplomatic card for once. I think for long, Narendra Modi has been trying to give different operational names, Bollywood-like names to things that don't really happen in the real life scenarios. But Pakistan's reassertion with the economic dialogue more important than warmongering, and once again our reiteration on the western border as well, the situation that has emerged with Afghanistan. To be honest, we are far more closer to Afghanistan than India can ever be. We share a lot in common. And simultaneously to how maybe the Indian side wants escalation on the western border as well, Pakistan restraint in May on the eastern border and our constant restraint on the western border signifies that Pakistan is not willing to compromise on national security and
Pakistan
integrity.
means business. It has shown it in May. It continues to show that also in what happened with the Afghan Taliban government recently as well. I'd like to understand one more thing. Saif, Donald Trump says he has prevented 8 wars. He said it time and time again. He has again reiterated that. He also talks about the 7 jets, that really irks India. He said during the Pakistan-India conflict, 7 planes were shot down, quote unquote, and that is what we showed in the report as well. He says, I called both countries and told them if they go to war, the US will stop trading with them. Is trade being used as a bargaining chip by the US?
Absolutely so. I think US has been a country in the world that has used trade historically as well to avert a lot of things that could have otherwise gone into an imbalance. I think you're living in the world of a neoliberal economic world fashion. You're living in a world where economic dialogue and economic diplomacy is far more important than anything else. And Trump's very idea of making America great again was an economic narrative. His very idea of trying to reassert the American foreign policy was very different from the Democrats. The Democrats, with all their might, no matter what they said, they were more interested in taking things by the gun or taking things by the American tech. Trump is more interested to take things by the American economy. And I think the magnanimity of the American economy definitely signifies the American role as an emerging technology supplier to Pakistan as well. And definitely so, Pakistan's biggest bilateral trade partner is the US. And Trump is not simply trying to assert the American way of doing things or the Trump administration way of doing things to Pakistan. He's trying to prove it to India as well, that with the economic figures going down, with poverty becoming a real problem, with internal politics in India trying to maybe bring down Narendra Modi, I think it's high time for Modi to sort of divert his strategies from operational management of warfare, of which he's a big failure, and divert it to maybe international diplomacy.
Well, I think the world knows that anyways. Saif, I'd also like to understand this peace, this pressurizing India for peace, this peace in South Asia that we hear Trump alluding to time and again, is it being used as a bargaining chip as far as South Asia, particularly India, is concerned, or a genuine commitment to regional stability?
I think this is a genuine commitment. The way Donald Trump had been very vocal during the conflict in May as well, and the way the American diplomacy played a part to broker peace between these two countries that are both nuclear powers. You know, it's not simply about a bargaining chip. It's about a sustainable future for a good 1.6 or 1.7 billion people. If you look at the population of India, it's at a staggering high, 1.4 billion close. And if you look at Pakistan, it's almost 250 million. So almost a good 17 or 18% of the world, or 15% of the world at least, lives in these two countries. And if these two countries go nuclear, which Modi doesn't really understand, it will not be a bargaining chip in anyone's favor. It will be a global demise. It will be a global anarchy. It will be a global catastrophe. So where the world is getting to be more sustainable in terms of trying to understand the problems of the future, when it comes to maybe sustainable development of the future, when it comes to gender inclusivity, when it comes to climate change, I think our neighbors also need to realize that the real issues lie somewhere else. The real issues lie in eradicating poverty, in trying to equate the balance of education, and trying to raise the standards of living of people, rather than, you know, telling the entire world that we've got another BrahMos and it can strike anywhere. They're more than welcome to do so.
Instability is no longer the in thing as far as the 21st century is concerned.
And the problem really is that BJP has sold this narrative since 1982, since its very inception.
Continues to sell it now that the elections are also about to happen in Bihar.
It's part of their, you know, it's part of their political discourse. Agreed. It is the only thing that sells when it comes to the BJP.
I totally agree with you on that. On the same point, I'd like to understand, on the one hand, Trump calls our Field Marshal Asim Munir one of the best. He also praises our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He also calls Narendra Modi a great friend. Do you feel that the US can somehow, somewhere act as an impartial mediator in South Asia, particularly when it comes to issues such as the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir?
Definitely so, they can play a part. But that part might not be an impartial part entirely, because when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, I think we need to take in regard that China has got certain stakes as well. And historically so, India has not really shared a decent relationship with China either. It has been on you know, fighting corridors with Pakistan. It has been on fighting corridors with China as well, if you talk about the Sikkim boundary, or if you talk about the northern Tibetan corridor. So I do think that where at least USA is trying to assert itself to act as a mediator, or to show goodwill that hasn't been shown before, I think maybe we need to see it with optimism. Global pessimism is a real thing these days, but honestly speaking, I think in a globalist world, we need to see that if something is coming in from the world's most powerful country, or the world's most powerful you know, economy at least, no matter how much indebted it is, but it's still you know, got a name in its technology, it has got a name in its tech sector. When it comes to the American way of doing things, certainly they have been trying to broker a lot in the world, and that has been so since 1945, the creation of the UN, and the way in which they tried to assert democracy and neoliberal economics as a way to mediate differences. I think it's a reassertion of the American legacy. And Trump is trying to revive maybe the foreign policy ambitions and aspirations that America once historically had lost.
All right. Then what happens to all of these Indian claims that deny the fact that the US has ever mediated between Pakistan and India as far as this May conflict is concerned? If there is a constant denial, then how can the US even move towards some kind of a mediation role?
Well, honestly speaking, Umar, number 7 is the most hated number in India right now. And when it comes to, you know, there's 7 journalists like Arnab Goswami and Major Gaurav Arya, I think
even Barkha Dutt and others.
And I think General Bakshi as well. They can stay in all denial that they wish to. But on a very serious note, when it comes to the independent observation about what really happened in May, and even the investigative journalists who were sitting in India right now, they really bashed BJP's warmongering ideas, and they also bashed the operational capacity and the operational calibration of the Indian military itself. So I think that was enough a reality check, and this reality check, I think, if being given by the President of America again and again, is a reassertion of the fact that India needs to come on the diplomatic dialogue. And it was an absolute insanity that day to see them winning the Asia Cup and refusing the trophy from Pakistan, despite the fact that that trophy was given by the chairman of the Asian Cricket Council. It wasn't being given by
date, they haven't yet received it, although it has been said that there will be a ceremony next month in Dubai in which this will be given, but it will be again given by the chairman of the Asia Cricket Council.
So I think when sports diplomacy is even failing, then I think seriously the Indian political spectrum needs to realize that they are really bargaining.
I think there needs to be a revisit of the entire Indian policy by the Indians themselves. Whether that happens with or without pressure by US is something that we'll see in the coming days. We've also been joined by Johar Saleem Sahab. He's a former Foreign Secretary and the President of IRS. Thank you very much, Johar Sahab, to have joined us. We are talking to each other after a very, very long time, so I hope everything is fine at your end. Under the current circumstances, Johar Sahab, when you see Donald Trump praising Pakistan, pressurizing India and telling India that there should be no war from now on with Pakistan, and of course also praising Pakistan for its role in the current scenario, global and regional, how can, in your point of view, Pakistan leverage this evolving dynamic to project itself as a more consistent, as a peace-oriented regional player?
Firstly, I think in terms of what President Trump has advised the Indian Prime Minister, because Trump is very much invested in the sort of, in peace in South Asia, because he was the one who played the role of a mediator, which unfortunately the Indians denied subsequently. And in fact, that was one of the irritants which emerged between India and the US and worked to their detriment. Perhaps a poetic justice. But now, because Trump is the type of president who doesn't like wars, who doesn't like conflicts, he likes to make deals, especially deals which would bring peace and harmony and more trade and more business. He's always looking for those opportunities of enhancing America's trade, America's investments in other countries investing more in the U.S. These are the type of partnerships, the business opportunities, which he really focuses upon, and I think that is what South Asia needs as well. South Asia needs stability. South Asia needs peace, durable peace and stability. An economic framework of cooperation, more connectivity, and it's very unfortunate that India's hegemonic policies, their eternal quest for dominance, which is rooted in totally misplaced arrogance and misplaced objectives, I would say. So I think in that way, that is the backdrop of this conversation that took place between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Now, President Trump has certain leverages. Of course, the biggest leverage that he has with India is the trade card. He imposed 50% tariffs on India, much more than the tariffs on Pakistan and other countries in our region in East Asia. And we have to recall that India has a huge trade with the U.S., where the balance of trade is heavily in favor of India. They earn over $45 billion a year in terms of trade surplus from the U.S. And that's not just it. They also basically, get a huge investment from the U.S. companies. The U.S. companies, especially the big tech companies, they've outsourced thousands upon thousands of jobs. And then, 70% of the H-1B visas, for instance, were being used by the Indians. So there's a huge economic leverage that the U.S. has. And that is why Modi has to listen to what President Trump says attentively.
All right. Johar Saab, you say that Modi has to listen to what Donald Trump says. But at the same time, if you look at the past statements that are emanating from the Indian leadership, whether it be the Indian Army chief that says that Operation Sindoor Part 2 is in the making and their armed forces are in a state of readiness. And, comments like this could be political, could be non-political, could be strategic, but will sufficient pressure from Donald Trump lead to a change within India as far as its anti-Pakistan narrative is concerned?
So far as the anti-Pakistan narrative is concerned, that will go on, because that is the political capital that BJP has. So, they've built their whole political capital on that for years and years, for decades now. anti-Muslim, the hate Muslim and hate Pakistan ideology. So that I don't think is going to change, especially when an election cycle is beginning. There were the elections in Bahar, and then there'll be elections in other important states, eventually leading to the next general elections. So that I think, and particularly at a time when economically India is not really doing great. So Modi, whenever that happens, he doubles down on the Pakistan hate ideology. So that is about the narrative itself. Now, in terms of the actual actions that they might take, I think because these statements that we recently saw coming from the defense forces, which is unfortunate again, because that shows how much he has politicized his own generals, his army, his defense forces, army, navy, air force. This was not the want in India. This was not the tradition in India. In the past, the defense services chiefs had a great deal of autonomy there, and they were not really politicized, not even by somebody like Indira Gandhi. But I think perhaps for the first time in Indian history, we have seen the services chiefs being not just politicized, but being used literally as sort of, as agents of BJP in some ways, to spread their political ideology and sort of, to enhance their falling political stock to help that stock rise again in some ways, which seems difficult at the moment. But I think so the narrative is there. But in terms of actual actions, like when he talks about having in Sindoor 2, that's where what Trump says matters. Because, and Trump hinted at that as well. He said, okay, in the past as well, Trump mentioned that, when India was not accepting ceasefire, and he said, okay, then, I will basically freeze trade with India, and whichever country doesn't accept cessation of hostility. And, there might have been another message in that meeting to India that, using the trade card again. Because I don't really think instability in South Asia suits either of the two countries. And it doesn't suit the West as well. It doesn't suits the U.S. because U.S. is right now, as per Trump's policies, as per his priority, is focusing on building economic bridges in many parts of the world and in South Asia as well. There, for instance, in terms of Pakistan, they're interested in the critical minerals here. They're interested in the energy sector, many other sectors, and they're having more trade as well. Of course, they've talked about oil, like the possibility of some big reserves.
But John Saleem Saab, to recap it, what I understood is that India cannot afford to, take or have the US in as a foe. It would rather have as somebody who which remains on India's side. But at the same time, I'd like to also understand your point of view on the purchase and sale of crude oil that India is buying from Russia, to which, of course, Donald Trump has time and again pressurized India, but India has not yet relented to it. Even now, as we speak, this sale and purchase is going on. And I'd like to just point towards India's assertion that it says it was not aware of any conversation between Narendra Modi and Donald Trump on this issue, to which Donald Trump says, and I'll quote here, but if they want to say that, then they'll just continue to pay massive tariffs, and they don't want to do that. What does India want to do then?
Okay, now this is an interesting issue because you see, that is where India got exposed. I mean, they've got this policy of strategic autonomy. They always claim that their foreign policies is built around that concept of strategic autonomy. But in actual fact, it's primarily strategic hypocrisy or strategic duplicity that they practice in terms of the Chanakya philosophy. So here we saw, on the one hand, they were being very vital element of the Western strategy against China in terms of the containment of China. All the membership of Quad and I2U2 and other organizations and so-called Indo-Pacific strategy. But on the other hand, we saw them trying to hobnob with China again, during this SCO and with Russia, of course. And with Russia, this oil purchase, it really undermines the Western efforts to dry up the resources, to shrink the resources that are available to Russia for waging the war in Ukraine. So it's very critical for them. And India, the oil that they've been buying for Russia, it's not for their domestic consumption. It's oil that they are refining and then they're selling in the world's oil markets. We can probably say black markets even. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars that they're earning doing that. Now, they had, apparently, as per the media reports, they had committed to Trump that they would halve this this purchase of oil from Russia. But in actual fact, what we've seen is because, when the media asked those refineries, have they received any indication that the oil supply would be halved in the coming days and weeks or months, they had no such indication. So we have to see how it plays out, because I think there's certain commitments that have been made, but at the same time, Modi is finding it difficult from a sort of his domestic kind of compulsions point of view, because it is earning them, like I said, literally like billions upon billions of dollars, and Indians, and of course, like BJP has a very symbiotic type of a relationship with some top billionaires in India. The party is indebted to them, and they have a great deal of influence on BJP policy. So it's not easy for Modi to take decisions which could annoy some of those some of the big business there, and also perhaps lead to some sort of economic slowdown in India, because already the trade environment in the world is it's getting a little more challenging. So that is there. So they have to weigh the cost and the benefits. The cost of these additional tariffs that have been imposed on the one hand, and the benefits of that they're getting from purchasing all this very cheap oil from Russia despite the sanctions. So I would say in that way they are in a dilemma. So only the coming months will show which way the dice will roll.
All right. Thank you very much, Jawahar Saleem Sahab, to have joined us. That was Jawahar Saleem, former Foreign Secretary and President of IRS, talking about, of course, these latest statements by Donald Trump concerning India. And the whole, ball is in India's court on how it's going to move forward under the current circumstances. Saif, I'd also like to thank you very much for your presence here in the studio. Saif Jamshaid Baryar, ladies and gentlemen, international affairs expert, also joining us. And it was wonderful to see you today as well. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back, and our second topic, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan in particular, but also somehow, somewhere the West. Now, this basically concerns a row between the US and China, and this time this is a new complex phase of economic confrontation where the rare earth minerals have taken some kind of a front seat. But when we talk of rare earth minerals, at the same time, Pakistan's role also becomes important, because the US has evinced a lot of interest as far as Pakistan and its rare earth minerals is concerned, and this could be or prove to be a boon for Pakistan in the coming years as well, if things move in the right direction. On the one hand, we've got tensions on this very issue. On the other hand, this is something that is favoring Pakistan. Will rare earth minerals derive world politics now? Will Pakistan take some kind of advantage from the current situation and reap benefits from these rare earth minerals and its export? We've been joined by Dr. Usman Chohan, who's an advisor on economy from CAS, right here in the studio. Usman, thank you very much to have joined us.
Pleasure.
With global competition, Usman, intensifying over rare earth minerals, this is something that we're hearing more and more with every passing day. It seems as if it is the backbone of advanced technologies, and that is why everybody wants to acquire it, whether it be the US or whether it be China. How can Pakistan, in your point of view, leverage its vast deposits in different areas to position itself as a central player in this new geopolitical resource race?
First of all, I'm so glad to be on the show with you. It's really a pleasure.
The pleasure always ours.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And the question that you've asked is the most important one, that can Pakistan position itself meaningfully in this confrontation between the United States and China that has an economic element to it. Pakistan is one of those rare countries that seems to be navigating very well the tensions between the United States and China by being in the good books of both countries and in fostering, either renewing good ties with China or taking new impetus towards the United States. This is quite rare because if you look at the EU, for example, it is getting a bad deal from the United States and a bad deal from China. India is getting a bad deal from the United States, bad deal from China. So Pakistan has done a very good job in terms of at least opening the doors to investment from both sides. So that's the first step. Then it comes into the question specifically of rare earth minerals. So on our side, we have been advertising the proposition that there may be $6 to $8 trillion worth of deposits of minerals, including rare earth minerals, in 2 of our western provinces. The actual number might even be larger because it also depends on commodity prices. It also it depends on the capital intensity of production in the future. We'll have more and more high-tech stuff come on. And it also depends on whether exploitation of such reserves can happen in other parts of the world. I think that Pakistan has a much stronger case than many of the other parts of the world. But here's the thing. We are talking about extracting and mining it. The real bottleneck in the supply chain is refining. 70% of mining happens in China, but 90% of it the refining happens in China. Refining is actually very hard to do at scale. That's where China has specialized. The West basically gave up this portion of the sector of the economy.
So China has an advantage there, basically.
A huge advantage, because to do this at scale for such rare stuff is very, very hard. Can Pakistan be an alternative in refining this to, one, extract more from the value chain, but also become a competitor in this, so our gain as well as the world's gain? It is possible, but it will take some time, because doing it at scale means that you're not just using your own inputs, your own extraction, but minerals have to come from around the world to be refined here. But that would be an amazing thing, because China may not like the idea of having an alternate refining thing, but if China is an investor in it and China has a say in it, it would be very happy. The other thing is, America would certainly want another alternative place for refining stuff, and they are working towards it, but they need at least 10 to 15 years, and they're not cost competitive otherwise.
All right, but in all of this scenario comes the China-US row, and that is also centered more or less on the rare earth minerals, which are of course central to modern industry, as we have all understood. How might this tension between the US and China, in your point of view, reshape the global supply chains, A, and B, influence emerging economies that hold similar resources?
Oh, this is a very good point. So it's actually cost inefficient. From an economic perspective, it's not efficient to have multiple full-blown supply chains around the world. Globalization's main proposition was to integrate the whole world into a more efficient supply chain. The efficiency gains were huge from that. Now we will have parallel systems working, and depending on how you're aligned or who's giving you a better deal, you will jump from one to the other. So there is in economics, what we call a consumer welfare loss. The prices of things will go up, and it's inflationary, fundamentally inflationary as a process. But there are national security considerations. The technological edge is very sharp now in terms of China pushing ahead on semiconductors, the US trying to maintain a slight lead, but also doing all of the applications at scale, all of the derivatives, the GPU processors, the satellites, the EVs, so many things in the 21st century require this supply chain to work for them. So we have a contention between national security considerations of the great powers, as well as the economic efficiency and gains and the deflationary power in both camps. So it's hard for countries to work it out which of these is more important.
All right, let's come to Pakistan and the Pakistan-US partnership as far as rare earth minerals is concerned. Now, we see that the whole shift is from security and aid to minerals and technology. Could this, in your point of view, mark the beginning of a more balanced and strategic economic alliance between the US and Pakistan? And do you feel that now that the US recognizes Pakistan more and more, as is seen by the various reports of Donald Trump, as a regional power, could Pakistan also be a regional power in the rare earth domain?
It certainly could. It certainly could. And the US cooperation with Pakistan would be instrumental for this. This is a win for the US, it's a win for Pakistan, and it's a win for the global economy, because it's deflationary as the supply of rare earths comes online. Even if it's refined elsewhere, the fact that there is more supply even at the raw version is very good. Now, the fact is that the US did have a transactional and security-oriented relationship for 70 years. We were fed up with that, and Trump has brought a whiff of fresh air into the White House, a new mindset, a deal-maker attitude, and this allows for old, rigid mindsets in Washington to be put aside. It's a very good thing. And his deal-maker approach, he's looking for opportunities that make sense for America and for other countries. With Pakistan, rare earths is the first thing that was put on the table. But I want this partnership to be much more comprehensive. It's the world of aid is over. The world of trade is on. And trade is actually acrimonious. So make sure that everybody tries to get some good deal out of it. No more one-sided approaches to this stuff.
Maybe we'll see China and the US working in the near future on the same thing. As you said, China has more capacity. Maybe it will help the US and other countries. It's so that rare earths could maybe bring the world together.
Possibly.
Let's be optimistic on that. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. We'll be back after a short break and we'll of course be going towards the West now. Now, when it comes to the West, the leading story today concerns the strikes and counter-strikes by Ukraine on Russia and then Russia on Ukraine. The fact is that there has been a lot of destruction in that, as has been seen in the past as well. Both countries are adamant to continue this conflict to its very end. Or the same agenda was the meeting also between Donald Trump and Putin, which the American side says is no longer happening. The Russian side says is happening. What is the truth? More in the following report.
Unleashed one of its largest retaliatory assaults on Ukraine on Wednesday, following a series of Ukrainian strikes deep inside Russian territory, including a reported Storm Shadow missile attack on a chemical plant in the Bryansk region. In the overnight barrage on October 21st to 22nd, Moscow launched 28 missiles and more than 400 drones targeting multiple regions, including the capital, Kyiv. The attacks caused extensive damage to residential buildings and energy infrastructure, leaving vast areas without power. Ukrainian officials confirmed at least 6 deaths and over 25 injuries in Kyiv alone. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the strikes as deliberate attacks on civilians and critical infrastructure, urging international partners to increase pressure on Moscow. The Russian assault came days after U.S. President Donald Trump postponed a planned summit with Vladimir Putin, calling it potentially a waste of time.
I don't want to have a wasted meeting. I don't want to have a waste of time, so I'll see what happens. Take some time off because you got two countries that are killing each other. Two countries that are losing 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers a week.
The Kremlin, however, maintained that preparations for the meeting continue. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts in Europe gained momentum, with Kyiv and its allies reportedly drafting a new 12-point peace plan, rejecting Russian territorial demands. Despite the stalled diplomacy, fighting on the ground continues. Russia has made small territorial gains in eastern Ukraine while intensifying its campaign against Ukraine's power grid ahead of winter. The escalation highlights a worsening cycle of retaliation, dimming prospects for any immediate peace breakthrough in the protracted conflict.
Now, to discuss that in detail, we've been joined by Develay. He's an international political consultant, joins us from Moscow. Arnaud, thank you very much to have joined us. With both sides, striking each other, and this is nothing new, but now the strikes are becoming more and more regular. There is major missile and drone strikes from both the sides on each other as well. How, in your point of view, do you view these reciprocal attacks, and how is this shaping the military and humanitarian dynamics of a conflict that has now passed 2 years?
Yes, thank you for having me. Well, most of the strikes are nothing new. They might not have been reported as much as we might have anticipated, but strikes on energy facilities, whether nuclear power plant, as was the objective stated by Kiev when they invaded the Kursk region in August 2024, or oil facilities are concerned. This has been a strategy on both sides with, of course, very contrasted results. On Russia's side, obviously, the aim is to impede the military-industrial complex on the NATO-Ukrainian side from operating at full speed. On the Ukrainian NATO side, any attack deep into Russian territories, and we've had attacks as far as in regions like Mordovia, aim to basically inflict psychological pressure on Russian civilians. And obviously, we had one of those major attacks last night. 11 Storm Shadows were all shot down over the Bryansk airspace. And Russia, as you mentioned, retaliated massively, crippling some of the energy grid near and around Kiev. Kiev is now resorting to basically cut off periods to try to maintain its energy integrity. But this is an attrition war. This is part of what this conflict has been all about, not only in terms of man, which has been referred as a meat grinder, but also in Kiev's capacity to power its war machine. As the collapse of the front is looking increasingly likely, especially around the nodes of Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is this huge hub which the Russians are now controlling at the tune of 46%. Once Pokrovsk falls, it will be the open dash onto the Dnieper plains and the open access to no less than 5 major cities in northeastern Ukraine.
All right. Arno, I'd also like to understand, when you look at the Bryansk attack as well and the counter strikes and what has been happening lately, use of long-range weapons is what is becoming more and more apparent, like the Storm Shadow missiles and the Shahed drones, which shows continued technological escalation as far as this conflict is concerned. What does this indicate about the changing nature of warfare in this very conflict?
Well, to be sure, those long-range weapons, the Storm Shadows, have been used, for at least a couple of years now, along with the HIMARS. But keep in mind that the German version, the Taurus, has not been delivered, at least so far. And there are hesitation from Washington to deliver those Tomahawk missiles. So everybody understands that any operating of those missiles would require NATO assistance in terms of calibrating, targeting, satellite recognition, and this would basically create a frontal confrontation between Moscow and the West. So those missiles, to the extent they are already in Kiev's possession, will be used because they go back to Joe Biden's era. But so far, Donald Trump has refrained from delivering any kind of long-range weapons, understanding that this would not be conducive to any kind of diplomatic track.
All right, you talk of this, providing of the missiles to Ukraine, and that is, we have seen a deliberate de-escalation as far as the US is concerned, that doesn't want to supply Ukraine with these weapons as well. At the same time, there is talk of this so-called meeting between Donald Trump and Putin, that now Donald Trump says is not happening because he says it's a waste of time. The Russian side said that this meeting is still on. Then is the whole EU angle in all of that as well, that is backing Kiev full time. How do you see all of this strategic, diplomatic calculation affecting this conflict? Will this conflict end anytime soon?
Well, one has to understand that this conflict is existential for both sides. So to the extent neither side can afford a strategic defeat, we are bound to see a continuation of the current situation. That is, until or unless the conflict root causes are addressed, as Sergei Lavrov reminded everyone a couple of days ago. There's no point to have conversations about a ceasefire or any kind of arrangements which would allow Kiev to reload and recharge, so to speak, and regroup, unless, again, the root causes of the conflict are addressed, and those are already clear. No NATO membership, protection of ethnic Russians' fundamental rights, and basically denazification. Short of that, there's no really point in meeting to go over the same demands, which are unrealistic once one looks at the military situation on the ground. Russia is moving slowly, but it's moving westward. Its military objectives are being pursued diligently. And to the extent time is on Russia's side under the current configuration, there's absolutely no reason for Russia to rush into some kind of ceasefire agreement.
All right, so we see an escalation or an extension was still going on, and this is something that might enter another couple of weeks or months. Let's hope this ends sooner than later. Thank you very much, Arno Develay, joining us all the way from Moscow and giving us your point of view on this current conflict that has now entered its 1336th day. Thank you very much. Let's now take you to Central Asia. Azerbaijan and Armenia, who thought one day these foes would become friends? That is exactly what has happened because of US mediation. Now the neighbors have reached this agreement in August, but major hurdles of course still remained as far as the formal signing is concerned. But now Azerbaijan has removed all kinds of restrictions on cargo transit to Armenia. President Ilham Aliyev has said this is a sign of warming ties between the former foes after nearly 4 decades of conflict. Mr. Aliyev has told the Kazakh president at a meeting in Astana that a shipment of Kazakh grain via Azerbaijan to Armenia has marked the first such consignment since the transit was halted in the final years of the Soviet Union, when war initially broke out between the two neighbors. Positive signs all along, at least as far as this Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict is concerned. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of today's Beyond Borders. We always take you beyond borders and boundaries in a world where we can discuss anything, any country, but issues that pertain to this changing scenario in the 21st century and how maybe we can make efforts in order to make this world a safer place. Allah Hafiz.